Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen to the everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. The doctor saving lives at your local hospital, the war veteran down the street who risked his lives for our freedom, the police officers and firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling, but there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer, the ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what, I can fix that, I can help people, and I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world, others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks of the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews. I am on the line with Maxwell Ivy. Max, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Glad to have you here, Max. Just do a quick introduction before we actually get into the content. So basically, you help people tell their story so they can attract new clients, sell more of their products and services online. You do this by connecting hosts with people with hosts of podcasts, radio shows, virtual summits, so they can basically share their stories and reach new audiences. And you have your own podcast called, and I think it's a book as well, right? It's What's Your Excuse?
Right, that is the name of the podcast, and the book isn't out yet, but it's we're working on an anthology type thing where lots of people will share their stories of how they overcame their excuses and were able to succeed at whatever their big goal or dream was.
So I haven't mentioned this yet, but what is your excuse that that has motivated you to do what you do?
I really don't know that I have an excuse. A lot of times it's just come down to of not having a choice, maybe. As far as when I've done just about anything, whether it was starting my first website as the Midway Marketplace, selling amusement rides, or the Blind Blogger, or my first book, it was always more of somebody said, hey, Max, have you ever done it, or would you try doing this? Or in the case of the Midway, it was like, okay, the carnival world is over. I need to do something else. What do? I don't know nothing else, so this has to work. So I would say not an excuse, but as my dad used to say, I didn't have a choice, and a lot of times that seems to be what works for me.
So why don't you start off with telling us what you're known for today, right? What is your business like now? What do people come to you for?
Right. Well, what they come to me for now is to help them get exposure for their businesses or for their creative projects like authors, musicians, filmmakers. And I help them get clear on their story and then share their story. And that includes connecting them with podcast hosts and radio shows. It also includes social media promotion, direct marketing outreach for them. And it's really interesting because I originally thought I was going to be a coach and help people get unstuck and accomplish their big goals, but nobody wanted to hire me for that. But what they did keep asking me is, Max, how do you get on podcasts? Can you get me on podcasts? How about if I pay you to get me on podcasts? So that's how I got to where I'm at now. I've decided to find a place where what I'm good at is what people want to hire me for, and it's working really well.
So you do a lot of helping people like booking, right? So you would get them booked on podcasts and radio shows and stuff like that.
Right, but it's a little more than that because there are a lot of people who do what we're talking about. But with me, what I'm really doing is telling their story in a much more condensed version, to pique the interest of the host to the point where they pretty much can't say no.
Yeah. So you're making people irresistible to media outlets.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and it's definitely an in need thing. I know podcasting has sort of recently overtaken radio for a number of listeners and that kind of stuff. It's one of the fastest growing mediums on the planet.
Right. And you have radio holding companies and investment companies that are now buying into the podcast space and acquiring podcast platforms. And you're starting to see people with podcasts being recruited onto AM and FM radio networks. It's been interesting to see how first radio and television fought podcasting, and now they're just trying to co-opt it and see if they can't make a living off of it too.
Makes a lot of sense. It's one of the things that's growing. So let's talk a little bit about your origin story, right? Every hero has one. It's where you started to realize that you were different. Maybe you had superpowers, and that maybe you could help people, use those superpowers to help people, accomplish their goals. So tell us your story. Where did you start with this whole entrepreneurial journey?
That's one of those questions I never really know how far back they want me to go. So if
I start at like 9 when I tell my story. So
okay, all right. Well, in 2003, my father died, and by 2006, I realized that me and my brothers weren't going to be able to keep our family carnival going. So I thought, what else is there that I know? Since I had helped the family sell our rides when we needed to sell the old stuff so we could buy some newer stuff, I felt like I could try that and make it a career. I quickly realized how much I didn't know and how much I'd have to learn, because this was pre-WordPress, pre-Wi-Fi, and pre-Facebook. I had to learn how to hand code HTML, recruit clients, set fees, write ad copy, manage media, record videos, build an email list, use social media, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It seemed like every week, month, there was something new that either I needed to learn because it would help me, or because other people said, you really should be doing this. So I did that, and I still do that. The Midway Marketplace is still there to help people who need a ethical broker in the amusement world. But people were saying, Max, you're very inspiring. We love how you take on difficult challenges with joy, and we want you to share more of what it's like to be an entrepreneur who happens to be blind. So I decided to start a second website. I asked people what I should call it. People were like, Max, we've been calling you the Blind Blogger as shorthand for 2 years now. Why don't you just go with that? So I did. Turned out it's been a great thing, because people assume that I'm the only blind blogger. It's worked real great for branding. From that, a good friend challenged me to write a book as part of an online summit. So I started writing the book. The summit got canceled, but I finished my first book, Leading You Out of the Darkness into the Light, A Blind Man's Inspirational Guide to Success. That led to me winning one of the Amtrak Writers in Residency, so that I traveled cross country solo, which is also in a later book, The Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures. I've been blessed to speak at conferences around the country. From the books, that led to me being on a lot of podcasts and radio shows. Podcasts and radio shows led to me helping other people do it. It also led to me starting my own show, What's Your Excuse? And there again, the name came to me from my fans online, who said, Max, if you can do it, then what's our excuse? And I really fought that name. I was hoping to find something better, but it stuck. So now, What's Your Excuse is my tagline for the Blind Blogger. And I think that gets us up to today. But if I were going to pick one superpower, I would say it's the willingness to either ask for help or accept help when offered, because there have been a lot of places along the line where I wouldn't have got to the next step if somebody didn't come along and offer to help me, or if I hadn't decided I don't know what I need to do next. I need to ask enough people until I find somebody who knows the answer.
So if I'm just hearing your story correctly, you started off in the carnival world.
Yes.
Then you transitioned into carnival agency, where you're helping carnivals like promote and get things going, and you transitioned from there into blogging, and now you do basically media management, where you help people. I call it new media management. You help people get booked and pitched onto podcasts and radio shows and such.
Yeah.
That's That's quite the arc. You've been all over the place in the last 15 years.
Yeah, yeah, but think about it this way for a minute. I've gone from a carny kid who used to have to promote our festivals and fairs and help get people out to the Midway, to a blogger and podcaster who's trying to get people out to the virtual Midway, trying to get people to listen to people's shows, read and buy their books and things like that. It's not really all that different. It's just it just seems different because the two worlds are so different.
Yeah, and the medium of delivery is quite different, but it's the same type of concepts. So
it still comes down to putting feet on the ground, butts in the seats, or faces behind the screens.
Yeah, absolutely. So just out of curiosity, what would you say the ultimate benefit is to your clients with getting onto podcasts? Why, like, we probably have a lot of listeners here who haven't yet started getting onto podcasts. I would assume you recommend they do for promoting their business. Why would they do that?
Well, the number one reason is when you and I have a conversation like this, people get to really, they feel like they've gotten to know us in a way that they're not going to feel from a blog post or an email newsletter or a social media post. Yeah. We will have a personal, sometimes intimate conversation about things we both are familiar with or are interested in. Or, you're at least the kind of person that you've done enough interviews that you can probably understand just about anybody that comes on your show. So, we're talking with a host, he gets us or he can get us. We're talking in front of an audience that already likes the host. So they are more than willing to give us the benefit of the doubt. They're going to listen to us at least for the first few minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, because they like, know, and trust you. So that's the really big benefit of being on a podcast is you get to take advantage of exactly. You get to take advantage of an audience that already wants to like you because they like the host.
Yeah, and it does. I think it does a number of things. Like one of the things I've noticed for my clients and in the past is that your podcast guests are some of the most engaged audience you have, right? So you might have your people who follow your posts on Facebook, or the people who are subscribed to your stuff on Instagram, or the people who watch your YouTube channel, and then you have your podcast guests or your podcast listeners. And we did split tests with one of my clients where we were promoting to his Facebook audience, his YouTube audience, and his podcast audience. His YouTube audience was gigantic. It was like 20,000, 40,000 people. His podcast audience was only about 1,000 people. But when we promoted events and stuff, we would convert 90% of our sales out of the podcast audience more than we would like his big YouTube audience, right? When we're doing videos and stuff on YouTube. And this is a theory. I want to know if you agree with it or not, that one of the things that podcasts do that no other mediums do is like you can't see this because, blind blogger and whatnot, but I've got a pair of headphones in, right? You got a pair of headphones on your head, and the people who are listening to us are probably, they're in their car, or they're at the gym, and they've got a pair of headphones in, and we're like literally talking inside their head. It's a level of intimacy that you don't get with almost any other medium, right? Where you close your eyes and you can just hear the person inside your head, and a lot of times for a long period of time, right? And on a regular basis, right? Every morning at the gym for 45 minutes, right? Whatever it is, it's a level of intimacy that's just not available in most other mediums.
I never thought about the whole image of being inside somebody's head with the headphones and all. But I definitely agree with you there. And of course, it goes back to what I said in the beginning of this section is it's an intimate conversation, and it's being heard in an intimate format. And like you say, they're generally more loyal to podcasts. They're going to listen the same day, same week. They're going to listen for longer periods of time, which is great because on the YouTube, they may have only been listening for the first few minutes, but on his podcast, they may have been listening to the entire show. A couple of other benefits that I've noticed from podcast guests, appearing on other people's shows. One is you get the opportunity to get so much clearer on your message. You get to practice, not your elevator pitch, but at least your your answers to the usual questions that clients are going to ask you. So you get that information out there. But to me, one of the really big benefits is the emotional value, because one, me and you were having an actual conversation, live, face to face, or at least voice to voice. And there's an energy to that I've noticed over the last 6 years of doing this, that you just don't get from Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, or, things that are one-way transmissions of information. So when I do these interviews, I actually look forward to scheduling them as early in my day as possible, as early in the week as possible, because I find even a podcast interview that I thought at the end of that was like, Max, that wasn't really your best show. You need to do better. It's still, the rest of my day was great. A lot of high energy, just because you had a intimate conversation with somebody who, gets what you're after, and you spent that time exchanging ideas and having an actual conversation.
Yeah, I tell people all the time we're a story-born people, and honestly, for interviews like this is the first time we've met. What we're really doing is we're sharing stories with each other, and we share our stories to get to know each other better, and our audience gets to hear those stories. And it's I don't know, it's a interesting way to communicate and create a relationship with your listeners. And I don't know, I found it to be a very positive thing in my business, just from like a mental state, right? It puts me in a good place, when you get on and have interviews with people. And, one of the other things I've noticed is being a podcast host, is that, we tend to, as solopreneurs, be by ourselves a lot, right? Behind the screen,
isolated.
Isolated. And it's both ways, right? Because I've been on podcasts and been on these things. It's a great way to connect with this community, right? The community of entrepreneurs, that you don't always get to see every day in your life. So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits to it, both from someone who's running a business and using podcasting as part of their business, either as the guest or the host, but also for like growing your business and getting your message out there.
Right. And don't forget about the great opportunity it gives you after the interview, or after, whether you're the host or the guest, or you do both ways, is I have now talked to you for a half hour or an hour. While I'm not going to try to sell to you, we've at least started the process of creating a business relationship. And that's something it's easy to say that you want to do. And in our era of everything being online, it's supposed to be easy to do, but building relationships where you can actually count on helping each other down the road is not as easy as it sounds. And a podcast, whether you're the host or the guest, is a great place to start building those for future benefit to either your business or your personal life down the road.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you very quickly create the kind of relationships where the other person will, quote unquote, take your call. Right.
That's a perfect example.
Right. Because you don't after you've had a conversation like the one we're having now, you're not going to send me to your gatekeeper. Right. It's
no.
Hey, I know him. We've shared some stories. It's I liken it to the kind of person that, you're out camping, you're sitting around the fire, right? It's a fireside chat where you and I are having a chat and our audience is sitting around the fire with us listening. And it creates relationships that are, I think, to your point, they're valuable, whether or not they turn into business transactions or not, but it grows your network really well.
Yeah. And they often lead to other opportunities. I did a podcast 3 years ago as a guest. And since the time of that show, the host has invited me to speak at a conference. He's had me on his podcast. He recently referred me to another client for business. And this is a person I met originally after having a 30-minute conversation for his podcast. So yeah. Those things happen. And I refer to it as do you want fries with that? Because a lot of times after you do an interview, you will find out that the host has other projects that they're actively looking for people to participate in, such as a book collaboration, a conference, a virtual summit, I find a lot of podcast hosts also have a blog that they're open to guest posts, or they have a magazine. And so it's just the total media business that a lot of people who have podcasts are involved in. So when you do a podcast, one of the things that I often do when I send that thank you note for the show going live is to ask them if there's anything else I can help them with, and see if there is some event that maybe they need somebody. And maybe it isn't me that they need, but maybe I know somebody. Maybe I can make an introduction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, become a connector. So
yes,
let me we talked a little bit about superpowers, and I think part of the whole superpower thing is just understanding the power of what it is that you actually are delivering, right? Where you're delivering that kind of connection and networking and whatnot. But the other side of superpower is the fatal flaw, right? Superman has his kryptonite. Batman's not actually super. I suffered for a long time from being an obsessive compulsive perfectionist when it came to all the stuff I built online, and it held me back for a long time. What would you say your fatal flaw was or is, and how have you dealt with it, so people who might suffer from the same thing can learn from you?
I didn't even know I had this, but I found out last year that I often, especially with speaking, as I'm growing the podcast and the blog, I want to do speaking, and I've done some, is I let people know that I was willing to do just about any event, and I was willing to pay to be at the events, instead of saying, okay, I want to speak, but only under the right conditions for me, which would be either your event is local, or you're willing to provide my living expenses or pay me a fee. But since I didn't put it that way, I ended up agreeing to speak at events that left me financially short, to the point that last fall I ended up sick, broke, and about to be homeless in New York City. But I've since learned my lesson. I've come around to the error of my ways. And since I've started making it clear that, yes, I want to share my story, I want to inspire other people, but only if it's a good thing for me, guess what happened? I'm starting to find local organizations that want to book me. I'm finding opportunities where people want to at least pay my expenses to have me come share my experiences and teach some life lessons. And that only happened because I realized my fatal flaw was, just because you want to do something doesn't mean you need to do everything, or that you need to do things that are bad for you financially, or bad for your health or your personal well-being. So that would be my fatal flaw, is wanting to do things even if they're not good for me.
It should be all a win-win. That's the way capitalism works best, is when it's a win for everyone involved. And it's interesting. I actually find that's a common fatal flaw. It's something that I still struggle with a little bit, is this idea that you do have to actually think about yourself in all of your transactions, whether those are free or paid or whatever the transaction may be. You have to consider your needs and your health and your wellness and that kind of stuff, and everything from like how available you make yourself to your clients, right? Are you taking calls at midnight, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And I noticed a lot of entrepreneurs tend to be that way. We tend to be over available. We tend to care so much about our clients that we'll forget about ourselves, or care so much about our story and the thing that we're doing, that we'll, like I said, let our own needs and own things that we need to put together, put them on the side. And you realize that that's not a winning game, right? It's not a game that you can sustain, and it's not a game that you can grow.
No, it's definitely not sustainable. If you do that for too long, you will burn out, or have a health crisis, or somebody else will come along who does things similar to what you do, but he has more respect for his or herself, and is able to be more effective at what they're doing. It's a hard lesson to learn, that being selfish is not actually selfish. It's selfless because it allows you to continue providing service to the people who need it.
Yeah, it allows you to, when you actually are creating a profit in your business, it allows you to grow and continue to spread your message and provide a good experience and help people solve their problems. If you are not creating a profit, your business dies.
Yeah.
So you have to focus on that. because it's how you help other people. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really cool it's a cool thing to talk about, I think, because I think a lot of people miss that. And we think about more common things, like I mentioned, perfectionism, or communication things. But I think being able to have like self-interest and learning how to actually have self-interest in a good way is an important discussion.
Yeah. And one of the things I like about what you're doing with your show is this Fatal Flaw segment. There are way too many hosts who don't go out of their way to find out the things that haven't worked for their guests. There can be too much positive. There can be too much good news, to the point that people watching the interviews think, well, I can't do what that person's doing because they've always been great at it. Things have always gone their way. And the truth of the matter is, most people who are successful because they failed a lot first.
Yeah. And it's actually, it's part and parcel to the reason I'm doing this show, right? So the history for this show for me was a couple of things. One of them is Anne Ryan's book about Atlas Shrugged, and it's about entrepreneurs being the ones that hold up the world, essentially. And I've always sort of thought of Atlas as a sort of like a comic book style hero, and his job, like his superhero thing, is holding up the world, right? So entrepreneurs are heroes. And secondly, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, a multi-billion dollar storytelling engine, and they have a very, very common structure that they use for all their heroes. And the hero essentially has 6 parts that they put together for their story. They have their origin story, their superpower, their fatal flaw, their distinct personality, their common enemy, their driving force. And so I use that as a framework to tell the stories of entrepreneurs. And I think it's been really fascinating to really get to hear their stories, because you have to see both sides. You have to see where they came from. You have to see what they're good at, what they're known for now, and where they came from, what it took to get there, and the flaws and the mistakes that they made to get there, to really get a picture of the hero's journey for someone, and make it real for your listeners, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So anyway, it's super fun. So speaking of common enemies, the way I like to think of common enemy is, for entrepreneurs anyways, is if you could go to your clients when they hire you and remove one thing from their life, right, from their mindset, from the things that they're thinking, that would just catapult them to the next level. If you could just immediately remove that as soon as they hired you, so you could get them results, what would that be?
Well, it really doesn't have a lot to do with what I'm doing now, but it's the one thing I teach most often that I think would help most entrepreneurs and help most of your listeners. And it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And that is this whole idea that they have to do everything themselves. That if they have to ask for help or accept help from other people, that they're weak, inept, that there's something wrong with them. And to me, when you refuse to ask for help, you rob the other person of the joy that they would have received from helping you. And there are a lot of people out there who could use a bright spot in their day by helping somebody who really all they can do for them is say thank you. That's one of those things I learned growing up as a guy who knew he was eventually going to lose his vision. I was told it's okay to ask for help. People will be happy to help you. All that will ever happen if you don't ask is you'll get in trouble. Things will be harder. That's not the way most people are raised or taught from their parents or from their regular schooling. So it's the one thing I try to help people with as far as a fatal flaw, because if you think about it, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Bilbo is the hero of the story. Sam is the hero. They're the heroes of the story, but there's this whole cast of characters who, without them, there wouldn't have been a successful journey.
Yeah, absolutely. They have their support network, so to speak. And so I just want to be clear, you're speaking specifically not of hiring help, but asking for help when you need it from the people in your network and in your life.
Well, that's what I was speaking about specifically, but in general, it applies to both, because I have found that by being open about the problems I'm trying to solve in my business, that there have been people who have either offered their services for free or for significantly less than what they would usually charge, or in exchange for services I do offer, just so that they could help me solve the problem and be part of my journey. So it happens both personally in general, but it also happens in our business lives if we let it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, like, on the side where you're hiring people, one of the things that I noticed in my business was I was really holding myself back by not asking for help. And you know, and what I mean there is like actually asking someone to come in and be that position in my business. And you know, I was my own bottleneck. And you realize that, you know, even like you said, the journey can't be made by yourself. You have to have other people come along, especially if the journey is big and worthwhile. So the more people you can come in and help make it happen, you know, the better it works out.
Right. But we have so many, experts, leaders, gurus online who are giving people the impression that they're doing it all by themselves.
Yeah. And it's it's interesting. I've discussed that a couple of times. Well, like, you know, I'll have clients come in and be like, hey, you know, guru so-and-so is doing, you know, $100 million a year in sales, and like, how come I can't do that? Like, what is the difference between like what they're doing and what I'm doing? I'm like, what you're not seeing behind the scenes is that guy's got 90 employees, right? He's got a
Yeah.
huge staff. They're doing a big thing. He's not running like he's running an expert brand business like you are, but he's running it at a you know, at a massive team scale level, right? There's a difference between where we're at and where he's at, and if like you can get there, right? And but you know, the results are going to gonna hinge on the amount of like team that you have, right? At this point, it's just you and me, right? Or you know, you and your one VA or your one employee. We don't have an office of 100 people pushing things, right? You know, if you look at digital marketer, for instance, digital marketer has a massive staff. I mean, I'm sure they do 20 million, $30 million a year, but they're gigantic, right? They're not a one man shop.
Right. Yeah.
So cool. So let's talk a little bit about your driving force, right? So, you know, Spider-Man fights to save New York, Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index all the world's information. What is it that you fight for, right? What's your mission that you go out every day and are striving to work on?
This is my least favorite question when people ask me, where I'm going, or what my reason behind doing it is, because for the most part, a lot of the time, it's been curiosity. It's been satisfying a need at the time based on my short-term goal. It's been challenges from friends who I often tell people the best thing that can happen to you is to have somebody double dog dare you to do something. But I would say my overriding goal is to create a business that I enjoy showing up for on a regular basis, that I use to help support my family. And when I originally started, I would tell people, yeah, I'm nobody. I'm just a guy who shows up every day and works his butt off to build a business. And I've since found out that there are a lot of, because of the number of people who could do that and who don't, that what I do is inspiring to a lot of people. But I would say that's probably the closest thing I can get to an overarching goal.
So I think that is spot on, right? Because a lot of people, and this is the problem I have in my business and life too, is people are like, well, what are you fighting, right? If you don't have like a big goal or big something that you're going for, you know, like Apple's like working to be the intersection of, I can't remember what they say, you know, a liberal arts and technology and like change the world with computers, right? I don't have a goal to change the world, right? I have the goal to like support my family and, you know, really enjoy my kids while they're growing up. And I get to the medium I get to do that through is helping other entrepreneurs, you know, get their message out and do the things that, you know, I do for clients. And it's a lifestyle business for me, right? I have the time and stuff that I want to put into it. It's really cool. But you said something that I want to pull out a little bit. You said, I do this because of the curiosity. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, because I don't think people think of that as a legitimate reason to build a business. And I think that is a incredibly wonderful reason to build a business. But what's your thinking on that?
All right. Well, like for example, when I started the Midway Marketplace, the first thing I did was file for a domain name. But after that, I've got no idea what I do next. But I was fascinated by learning the different things. You know, the how to hand code HTML. You know, the part about picking colors, creating links, embedding photos. Trying to figure out a way so that I could, you know, upload media and share it with people. Later when somebody said, Max, I think you could write a book, you know, looking into it, finding out, well, how do you, you know, what's the best way to start writing a book, a nonfiction book, a lead magnet book, you know, finding, you know, one of the things I do now is I read other people's self-help books. I read other people's business books, because I enjoy seeing how they're doing it. I'm always interested to learn more or to learn something different. Recently, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who I said, well, I'm trying to think of what else I can do that I'm not already doing. She's like, Max, think of something you're doing that you could quit doing. And so, you know, I enjoy having conversations. I enjoy reading. I enjoy finding out how things are being done by other people and then seeing, well, is that really the best way to do it? Is that the way I should do it? You know, there's a lot of facets of what we do, and a lot of what we do is drudgery, stuff we don't enjoy doing. But even stuff you hate doing can be fun when you're first starting it and you're having to find out, well, how do I go about this? So yeah, curiosity is a big part of it.
It's I tell people it's the for me anyways, it's a game, right? Where it's a game I'm playing.
Yeah.
And it's the game of life and game of business, and it's, you know, it's like exercising that learning muscle, and it's fascinating to me. And it's like you know, I mentioned earlier I have a 9-year-old son who's really into video games, and
yeah,
you know, like most 9-year-olds, like over his head into video games, and he constantly wants me to play with him, and I do play video games with him when I can, but I find myself bored by most video games because I'm like, the game that I'm playing in the real world is so much more fun, right? It's more fun to do the things and figure out the things, and like, how can I take my business to the next level? How can I, you know, scale without, you know, like you ask yourself interesting questions like, can I double my revenue in half the amount of time, right? Like the amount of time that investment that it takes. And like, that's a reality. You can do that, right? And figuring out how to make that happen is a fun experience. Or, you know, can I double my audience? Can I help more people in this way, right? How, like there's, when you ask yourself cool questions, you start to get yourself onto cool, fun adventures. And you feel like, I don't know, you're leveling up your life as you sort of like add skills to your tool belt.
Right. And recently I read a book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And in there, she makes the case that curiosity will carry you through when your passion deserts you.
That is a really good point. And I think a lot of, I think we do a disservice to a lot of entrepreneurs by telling them to chase their passion. Because the reality is most people don't know what their passion is, and passion is not something that is born, right? It is something that I think it comes from mastery, right? As you master things, you become passionate about them, and it's a reaction to something else that you're doing. It's not something that you start with. So, anyways, I think she's spot on with that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your tool belt. And I think you might have some interesting tools because, you know, you have to deal with also not having the same visual capabilities as other heroes might have, right? So, you know, maybe you have a big magical hammer like Thor, or bulletproof vest like your neighborhood police officer, or maybe you really just love how Evernote helps you organize your thoughts. What are some of the tools that you use on a regular basis that really help you do what you do for your clients or do what you do in your business?
I would say the one that I use the most is a third-party app called Mars Edit that allows me to create blog posts even when I don't have internet access. It allows me to do them with a screen reader. It's very friendly to using speech to input and edit the text, and also to add the links and the media and all that stuff, and just upload it to my website whenever I've actually got internet access, or when I have time to then go to the website and make sure that it came out online the way I intended it to on my computer. Recently, I'm really starting to love Google Sheets. It's allowing me to keep much better track of who I've contacted for whom and when and what the result was. So I'm finding a lot more organization, and I'm one of these people who needs more organization and structure and systems in his life. I know it. I don't do it well, but I'm getting better all the time at systems. Haven't had a whole lot of luck with Trello, but I love Zoom. It's one of the few things I use on a regular basis where every mouse click for that product is also reflected in a keyboard command. And then, of course, on their iOS versions in a voice command. And when you're doing things with speech, you don't always have the luxury of what's called a virtual mouse click. Sometimes you can do it, but a lot of times you do it and it doesn't actually create the action it was intended to by the designer of the website. So being able to actually have keyboard commands in an app or a website is great, and Zoom is one of the best, if not the best there. And just in general, I'm really loving the versions of apps and websites on my iPad and iPhone. There are a lot of websites that are very frustrating when I use them on my laptop, but become much friendlier to deal with when I view them through iOS, which is, is not a big surprise to most people, because nowadays people design for Android and iOS before they design for laptops and desktops. But it's, and of course, VoiceOver, which is the name of the screen reader I use, is the #1 thing. And thankful to Apple, we have the same screen reader available through all 3 platforms and available on any device, because back in the bad old days, if a blind person wanted a computer to talk, he had to physically install hardware and software on that computer. But now you can walk into any store that sells apples, and you can type a couple of keyboard commands, and you can use the one in the display section if you had to. So those would be some of the things I use. And
it's really interesting. I hear Apple talk a lot about VoiceOver. They mention it like every keynote, and like how they're making stuff more accessible. But it's not a thing that I ever use, right? Because it's not something I need. So it's interesting to see like how some of that stuff actually gets used by business people in the real world. And so one of the things I've always been curious about, because I do this all the time, I use their Dictation to write things, and then after you've written it, my workflow would be to read it and see all the things that it messed up, and then go back and fix them.
Yeah.
So obviously that can't be your workflow, because you can't go back through and read it. So how do you deal with the disparity between what you say and what the computers are capable of picking up today?
That's a great question. What I do is I do use the dictate button just like you do, and I dictate it. When I stop talking, then I place my finger at the top of the edit field and scan through a word at a time or a line at a time to find where it is that I've messed up. And then, I have to slide my finger down to the delete button and delete those characters, and then slide my fingers around till I find the letters that I really wanted the first time and put them in. And then I have to swipe the section so that I hear it speak that again, to make sure that what I thought I changed is what I actually changed. Because as with most people, you're moving around the screen. Sometimes you don't pick the letter you thought you picked, and sometimes Siri will try to help you by completing your word for you, and well, you and Siri had 2 different ideas of what word you were typing.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, but it's a similar process. It's just longer and a little more tedious, because I have to depend on it enunciating everything, and I have to listen to it say everything twice. First, when I'm checking to see it, and then again after I've fixed it. So it takes me quite a bit longer, and there's a little more patience involved in getting a text message sent correctly. Now, I have a question for you that I think is interesting. Have you ever noticed on your iPhone or your iPad that if you click the dictate button and dictate text, you get one result. But if you say, hey, Siri, send a message to whoever, and you tell it what to say, the result is a lot less accurate?
Yes, I have noticed that.
It makes no sense to me. They're on the same device. They're from the same manufacturer. The results should be the same, shouldn't they?
You'd think so, but I think they're actually using two different technologies, right? So I think the dictation is using it's using a different kind of language processor. Anyways, I'm not sure what the technical reason is, but it is definitely different. And I frequently use dictate instead of the Hey Siri because the dictate is far more accurate.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who does that. I was starting to worry about myself.
Nope. It is totally a thing, and I get it. And so it's like, so something that's interesting to me is like I will use dictate because speech is faster than text, right? I'm a pretty quick touch typist. I can type like 70, 80 words a minute pretty accurately.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter how fast I type. I can talk 150, words a minute plus, right? And most people can.
Yeah.
So like even I would have to be like a world-renowned typist to type as quickly as you can talk. And so I use dictate to speed up my workflow, right? And you're saying, so you use dictate because one, you have to, but it doesn't actually enhance or like speed up the workflow. It's
No, I would say it speeds up my workflow, just not as much as it speeds up your workflow.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do talk faster than I type, especially much faster than I type using one finger at a time on the iPhone or iPad screen. So, yeah. But it's just that my process is a little slower than yours, so the efficiency isn't as good, but it is better than typing it.
Yeah. So can you do the touch type on a physical keyboard?
Oh yeah. In my lifetime, I've gone from a manual typewriter to an electric typewriter to a keyboard to word processors. So yeah, using touch typing is like muscle memory, second nature to me.
Nice. Yeah. So how does it work on the soft keyboards, right? So when because you can't actually feel them, like you can't put your hands on the home row.
Well, with the soft keyboard, you have to depend on the speech echo to know where you're putting your fingers.
Oh, and it'll actually tell you like what key your finger's on?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't even know it did that.
And then after a while, you get to where you have some spatial memory and you start to be pretty accurate as far as putting your fingers where they should be. And then just like with any other type of keyboard, once you get your hands in the right position and keep them there, it makes the other keys that you want are all in spatial relation to where you're starting out at. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Just like when you go to a new city, you start out with your hotel, then you learn the way to the conference center, then maybe to the zoo or the aquarium. The longer you're somewhere, the more you learn about it. It's the same way with the keyboard like that.
Yeah. So important question I have to ask you. A lot of us entrepreneurs that are listening to this show or who are watching you on a regular basis, we create things, right? We create apps, we create websites, we create podcasts. How important would you say making those things accessible to people with, visual or hearing impairments? How important would you say that is to actually take those into account when you're building things?
I'm going to say it's even more important than people think it is, and here's the reason why. Earlier we talked about loyalty, about how the people listening to the podcast were more likely to listen to the whole show and to take action. Mm-hmm. As a group, people with disabilities are very loyal customers. We are very brand loyal or name loyal to people we feel like have gone out of their way to include us, which is one of the reasons why, even though now Android is starting to add speech and Microsoft is starting to add speech, that we still stay with Apple because Apple said, hey, y'all are important to us 10 years ago or 12 years, whenever the iPod 4 came out, because that was when they started the whole accessibility movement in all their products. So we still overpay. Yeah. So we overpay because we feel like we belong, like they care about us. And so if, while as a group, we're not a huge group as percentage of the marketplace, and we're even smaller as percentage of products and services purchased, but we're very loyal. We will not only buy from people that have gone out of their way to get our business, but we will ask other people to buy from them. We will share their content and push their website, products, services to our friends and family if we feel like they care about us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a bit of a halo effect, right? So one of the things, like we mentioned, we're talking about Apple a lot because they're a big recognizable company that does this, but they at their keynotes, they mention their accessibility features all the time, right? And very few of the people in the audience actually use those accessibility features, but they still give it stage time, like major stage time. And yep. I think part of the reason for that is that people like to work with companies that act bigger than themselves, right? That they act for larger causes, and to support companies that do that. Like one of the things that I have a supplement company, and our supplement company donates to Vitamin Angels with every purchase, right? And people like that. They will buy more from us because we support causes that they believe in. And I think so when you actually take the time to make your products and your services accessible, it provides that kind of a halo effect on your marketing as well. So even people that aren't going to use them are going to find that to be an important thing in their, the people they do business with.
Right. And another thing that I try to remember to tell online people that create online is some of these things you do for accessibility have SEO benefits as well. And the most obvious one are the alternative text tags. Most people do not know that while they don't matter as much as they used to, the title, description, keyword tags, they don't matter as much as they used to, but that alt text tag for images on your blog or your website, that's an additional opportunity for Google and the other search engines to find your website and index you for people that are searching for things that are mentioned in your photo descriptions that may not have been mentioned in your blog text.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I think people are missing an opportunity there, and the opportunity is not to speak to the machines; it's to speak specifically to other human beings, because that's what Google's trying to do. And if you actually think of your images on your pages, like, how would I describe this? I actually tell people this when they're putting their website images up, is how would you describe that image to a blind person, right? And you put that into the alt text because Google's gonna use that for SEO, and so you're gonna get that benefit. But it's actually beneficial to any blind person who comes to your website and goes through it, so you get like two benefits from it.
Yeah, and if you forget the alt tag altogether, it's as if your image doesn't exist. And if your image is tied to a link, it's as if your link doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for those people who don't know how the screen readers work, like, as for someone who uses it, it'll go through onto the page and it'll read the text, and when it comes to an image, the screen reader doesn't know what's in the image. It can't look at the image and then just out of nowhere describe it to you. Our computers aren't that good yet. So what they do is they look at that alt text and they actually read whatever's in that for you, right? So if we don't put anything in there, it just says image or just skips it entirely, right? Would you even know it was there?
No, I would not know it was there. And like I said, if your image is tied to a link, I would not know the link is there either.
Yeah, so it just skips over it. So the alt text
skips over it completely.
Yeah, but if it's there, it'll actually say image and then describe what's in the alt text.
Right. And something I didn't know about alt text for images that I recently found out is that if you use a image in your email newsletter and you don't add alt text to that image, it's as if it doesn't exist in my email program. And I wasn't aware. Apparently, there have been lots of people who have been sending images along with emails that I just didn't realize I wasn't seeing until I recently found out about how even images in emails have to have alt tags.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. So it's good to know that you should fill out that alt text field whenever it pops up for your website or emails. Use it, because
and most people are running a SEO plugin that prompts them for that information anyway. So it's, you almost have to not want to do it to not do it.
Yeah. So there's benefits for it. So definitely take the time and get it done.
The Hero Show will be right back.
Are you tired of trying to write webinars that don't consistently convert? How would you like to have a webinar that effortlessly created sales in your online business? You can. Introducing the Webinar Alchemy Workshop. Webinar Alchemy Workshop is an online masterclass that will help you write incredibly persuasive webinars for your online courses quickly and easily. Using what you learn in this class, you can build a webinar that educates your entire audience while still creating sales. For a limited time, you can purchase this masterclass for only $7, and you'll get the exact framework I've personally used to help my clients sell more than $1 million worth of online coaching and training just over the last year. Simply text the word alchemy, ALCHEMY, to 444999, and I'll send you all the details.
The music is by Purple Planet Music. Visit www.purple-planet.com.
And now, back to the show.
So I'm going to move on a little bit and talk a little bit about your own personal heroes, right? So Frodo had Gandalf, Luke had Obi-Wan, Robert Kiyosaki had his rich dad. Who are some of your heroes? Were they real-life mentors? Were they speakers or authors? Were they peers who were just a few years ahead of you? And how important were they to what you've accomplished so far?
Right. Well, I will openly tell anybody who listens that I would not be where I'm at this point if it wasn't for a lot of other people who either offered to help or responded to questions, many times dumb questions, with smart answers. But to start with, the most important one would be Adrienne Smith, who I refer to as my blogging mama, who taught me everything I know about relationship building online. Yeah, she loves that. She really likes that tag now, and she looks forward to hearing me say it in podcast interviews. But it's the truth. She, back when I really didn't know what I was doing, she taught me so much about how sharing people's content, leaving memorable blog comments, after a while sending out an email just to get to know people without asking for stuff, and building a relationship online, and how that eventually leads to opportunities, which in my case with her led to a roundup post, and it led to a guest post, and then it led to quite a few podcast interviews from people who saw the work I did on her website. And she's no longer online. She doesn't do interviews, but she's one of those people who I have to mention. Another one is Lorraine Regularly at wordingwell.com. She's been the editor on my 3 books. She first found me when she noticed that my blog, the images on my first blog at the Midway Marketplace, were ending up in the middle of my text, and people couldn't read my posts. And she got on the Skype with me and helped me fix that to where now people can see the images and read my posts, and that led to me hiring her when I needed an editor. So that's another person. She's a rape survivor and somebody who's experienced drug use and prostitution. So she's a really strong woman as well. I mentioned, let's see, Ashley Fox, who has madlemmings.com. It's spelled with a Z. He got a hold of me, about 7 years ago now. He said, Max, your website is good. He said, but it could be so much better. And he offered to help me move from HTML to WordPress and go from a visually gaudy, if not stroke-inducing color palette to a much more traditional white-black with occasional colors, and move it over to WordPress. And so I really appreciate, a guy like Ashley. As far as other people, there's been Joe Pardo, who I mentioned earlier. He had me on his podcast. He gave me my first opportunity to speak in front of an audience. He's been helping me gain more speaking opportunities and grow as a podcaster. And he's a guy who walked away from a 6-figure business to start his own thing. So, he's another person. And I joked about this with your assistant that I could do an Academy Award style speech that would go on until they kicked me off the stage. But I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit at 4. But there have been just so many people who have come along at the right time with the right information or skills or abilities when I was stuck and I was putting it out into the world that, okay, here's what I want to do. I don't yet know how I'm going to do that. I would really appreciate some help. And these people came forward. And to me, this hero section is one of my favorite things to do, because anytime you can perform a gratitude exercise, you can say thank you to the people who helped you get here, and show people that are listening that, you know, you're willing to help some other people move forward on their journeys as well. This is one of the best things I can do in an interview.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting to realize that, you know, the kind of people that you're mentioning as heroes are people like you and me, right? And you realize that at some point, your clients, the people that you work with, are going to look back and think, this person's a hero in my life because they really helped me get my business or my life or my career, or whatever it is that you help people with, to the next level. And that's exactly why I refer to this show as the hero show, because the work you do is a hero to someone, right? You're a hero to someone. And right, you just listed a number of people who are heroes to you because they've helped you move your life or your business forward in, you know, unique and powerful ways. So yeah, I love it. So last question that I do on the show is pretty simple. It's your guiding principles, right? So what are the top 1 or 2 principles or actions that you take on a daily basis that really you think contribute to the success and influence that you enjoy today? Maybe ones that you wish you had known when you started out on your hero's journey, you know, earlier in your career.
Well, there are 3 things that I try to do all the time. One is to start my day looking for at least one positive person, event, or experience, because I've found that if I get up in the morning looking for those things to happen or those people to come into my life, that is actually going to happen. So I'm always looking for that next person or event, and it takes practice when you first start doing it, but after a while it becomes second nature. And as I said earlier, people who have failed a lot, have had a lot of setbacks, are much better at finding the positive in their lives because they've had a lot of practice at it. The second thing is I totally believe that if you don't ask, they can't say yes. So whether it's asking for help, for skills, for employees and contractors, or it's just asking for positive energy for somebody to send you some good thoughts or a prayer, anytime, just never be afraid to ask, because as my dad always told me, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. And back when I was cold calling for a small carnival in Texas, I got a lot of no's. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is get up every day and find at least one small action that you can take that gets you closer to your goal. Those small steps, as they say, add up to big leaps. That's not my line, it's somebody else's, but it's true. But again, too many people get caught up in the big goal or dream or the larger steps to that goal, and they fail to take those small steps that are available on a daily basis. And if we take those small steps every day, and it doesn't matter how little it may seem to you at the time, those things are going to add up over time.
Yeah, and I know, like, one of the things I like to tell people is that is you'll overestimate what you can accomplish in a year, but you'll underestimate drastically what you can accomplish in 10, right? Because if you if you take small steps every day, and you look back at your journey over the course of a year, you might be a little disappointed, right? You're like, I didn't make it very far. I took a bunch of small steps, right? But if you look back at that starts to snowball, right? All the small steps, and by the time you get 10 years into a journey, you'll be world class, right? You'll be the top of your game, the top of your industry, because very few people see their stuff through past that first couple of years, right? And you can definitely make a huge impact in your life and other people's lives by doing exactly that, by taking a small step towards your goal every day and doing it over the long haul, right?
You just reminded me of 2 things. One is I never try to estimate. I always just do the work. And 2, I work really hard not to compare myself to other people or to my past self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a important thing to keep in mind. And then the other thing you mentioned about I'm going to lose my train of thought there.
It's my fault. I do that all the time. I'm sorry.
No, it's no problem. So what was it? You said doing something every day. What was the one you mentioned just before that? Because I want to get my train of thought back on that.
Let's see. I said taking small steps, asking for help,
Asking for
and
help. That was the one. Trains back. The asking for help on things that you want to do is the saying yes, right? Is you can't give people the opportunity to say yes.
yeah,
And I think that's such an important thing because my wife laughs at me all the time because I ask everyone for things like all the time. Like we go to the
um,
store. We go to the
yeah,
store, like, and I remember I needed to buy something for my headphones, and I went into Best Buy, and like I'm standing at the counter, and I was like, what are the chances you'll offer me a discount on these headphones? And the lady was like, oh, you know what? We actually have a price matching program. Let me see if one of the local stores has a good deal on it. She's like, hey, look, this store down the street is running a coupon for it. You get $5 off. We'll match their price, right? I got
yeah,
$5 off of a $20 product, right? So,
yeah,
and my wife's just like, that's crazy. Why would you, like, I would never even think to ask. And I make it a daily habit to ask all the time, right? Because if you
yeah,
don't ask, people won't
yeah,
say yeah.
yeah.
They
Two
do
years
that.
ago, 2 years ago, I was in the Apple store getting my laptop checked out, and um, I go back to pick it up, and I show them my charger, and you know how Apple chargers are; they do not hold up well. The insulation on them things strips, and
Here,
I had
I,
mine held together with black tape. Okay.
I know you can't see this, but our guests can. Here's my Apple charger for my computer, and there's no sheathing on the whole last 2 inches. It's just bare metal.
Yeah, that's a classic Apple charger for you. Okay. So I'm getting ready to walk out of the store. I've got my bag. I go, hey man, any chance you could give me a discount on the charger? And he looks at it. He goes, Mr. Ivy, for something like this, we'll just replace it. He just hands me one out of the bag, and they're listed at like $140 something. And I'm like, Patrick, let's just get the heck out of this store before somebody catches this guy.
Their mind. Yeah, right. So if you
But
don't,
that happens all the time, but you have to be willing to ask for stuff in it. And I've been called shameless, but hey, I spent 15 years promoting a small carnival in a state where everybody else had 2 or 3 times as many rides as we do. You get to the point where it's like, oh heck, I'm asking for stuff that most people won't give me anyway, but what if they do?
yeah,
You
what if
know,
they
and
say yes, right?
what if they
And
say yes?
it's such an important thing to use in your business, right? So every time when you're talking to clients, like you come down to things like pricing. If a lot of people struggle with their pricing, and they think no one will pay me that, and they struggle with if you don't ask for the rate you want to get, people can't say yes to it, right? Same kind of thing.
Yeah,
And and I know, like, I went through that experience when I first raised my rates to a point where they actually needed to be, right? I remember I've told
yeah,
the story a couple of times. I had a client that he paid me $500 and I made him $250,000, right?
wow,
In 6 weeks. And then I realized I needed to raise my prices to be commensurate with the value that I was providing. And
yeah,
the next time that I had a client, and I charged like $5,000 for what I was doing, scared me to death, right? Because I was like, I can't believe I'm going to do that. But I asked for it, and then they said yes, and then I was able to deliver at a higher level because of because of what I was able to do, right? So it's a lesson that applies everything from asking for carnival rides to getting a discount on your things that you buy at Best Buy, to learning how to actually ask your clients for your rates that you want to pay, or the other way around, asking people that you're working with for the rate that you want to give them for the services that you're asking for, right? So it's an
yeah.
important skill, is to learn to ask.
Yep, yep. It is an important skill, and it's like a lot of the important things. It takes practice. You have to start small and work up. You have to build those muscles. You have to build your asking muscles up. And it's also one of the things that if you go a while without doing it, then you got to kind of start over.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So last thing I do on the show, it's not really a question. It's something I call the hero challenge. And if you listen to the show at all, you've probably heard this before, but do you have someone in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial journey that would be good to come on the show and share their story? Who are they? First names are fine. If you want to do that, we can connect for full contact information later. And why do you think they should come on the show?
Man, that is just so hard because I really don't deal with anybody who doesn't have a good entrepreneurial story. That's like my first criteria before I can go to work for them. I mean, because if they don't at least have the germ of a good story, I mean, Stacy Greenberg is single mother with 2 special needs kids. It's growing a interior design business, specializing in hotels and motels. Amy Bovard is a former traveler and school teacher that's building a business as a speaker and an author. And she makes my travels and adventures look puny. She also happens to be blind. There's so many people I could recommend because, you mentioned this earlier in the show. You said we're a storytelling people. That a lot of what we do goes back to sitting around a campfire, sharing stories, usually to educate people about things they would need to know to survive in those times. But I just know so many people with great stories. I'm going to have to send you an email if that's okay.
Yeah, that is fine, and we'll totally take that, right? Because one of my goals with this show, and it probably will continue to be, is to highlight as many of the entrepreneurs that don't get seen as possible, right? Of course, it'll be fun to highlight some of the entrepreneurs that do get seen on a regular basis, that have some of the fame, but really the world is made to go around by people like you and me and the people that you're mentioning who are doing things and growing businesses that you may never even notice, right? And one of my favorite little stories about that, I had one of my clients, I can't remember if it was his dad or his uncle or something like that, was the guy who does tile for underwater features for hotels, right? So like when you look in a fountain, like the tile that's under there, like he's that guy, the guy who does that, right? And you're like, you never even think about that, but like there's the guy who does tile for underwater features, and no one will ever know his name, but that was a multi-million-dollar business that he grew, right? And that just fascinates me that there's the guy who does that, right? There's the guy who does, or the gal or whatever, who does all the little things that you never notice in your life but make up the the world that we live in. They're all entrepreneurs somewhere behind everything that you touch and see and interact with on a regular basis. Some entrepreneur touched it to make it happen. So it's really fascinating.
I've got one more that's a great one. I'm going to send you. Her name is Bianca, and they've developed a electrical outlet device that allows you to plug in things to electrical outlets even if you can't reach them. It's a really cool device that they're in the process of pitching, like Shark Tank and those types of venues, because they've got a great story, her and her husband, but it's a really cool product because how many times you've been in a hotel and you need to charge something, plug something in, you can't get to the plug?
Yeah.
So you're right. There's somebody behind all these things that we use. That's what made me think about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So last thing, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find you, right? If they want to hire you for any of your podcast, storytelling, pitching, booking, that kind of stuff. And secondly, who would be the best kind of person to reach out to you if they want your help?
Okay. They can find me at theblindblogger.net, theblindblogger.net. And I would say anyone who has a business or a creative project who also has a good story to share, because like I mentioned, if they don't have a good story, then it makes it kind of hard for my job. But the one thing I want to tell people is this: don't wait until you think your story is good enough to start sharing it. If you're not sure, reach out to me. We'll have a conversation about your story. The odds are you're doing something amazing. You just don't realize it yet. I know that was the case with myself. For 2 years, I thought, nobody would find what I'm doing inspiring, because there are quite a few people in general, and visually impaired people specifically, doing more things than what I was doing. But there were people who explained it to me. They're like, Max, there are people who could do great stuff that have no disabilities, no things really standing in their way, and they still do nothing with their lives. So that's why you're inspirational. There are a lot of people listening to this right now who have great stories. They're doing amazing work, but because they don't have somebody from the outside looking in to tell them that, they maybe think, what I'm doing isn't all that special. So I encourage people to reach out to me. Even if they don't hire me, your story is very important to your success in your business and your online personality. So even if you don't hire me, we'll have a talk, and I'll show you some things that in your personal story that will help you, at least in the short term, as far as what you're trying to do, what goal or dream you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key things there is doing, right? If you're doing anything, chances are you have a good story, because very few people do. and to be the kind of person who does things and creates things and moves things forward, right? If you've ever thought to yourself that, man, I don't know why someone would pay me for this, it's so easy, I always say that's a key phrase that lets you know that you're doing something cool and that you should definitely work on growing that and getting your story and your business put together around it. So if that's you, definitely take the time to reach out to Max. Obviously, he knows a thing or two about getting this stuff, up and going and getting people onto podcasts and stuff like that. So it's theblindblogger.net, where they can find you.
Yep.
And
they can find my social media stuff on the website. And I've also got a store there for my books and my What's Your Excuse merchandise that people can now purchase. So doing my best to grow what I do into an empire, as a host recently referred to it as. And I was like, I took 30 seconds to make sure she was still talking to me, but she was, and I am. That's one of the great things about being a guest on a podcast is a lot of times you find out stuff about yourself that you didn't realize, even after years of doing the work. There can still be an occasion where somebody points out something that I wasn't personally seeing, like the fact that people consider me an influencer, or that I now have a growing empire. Those are not words I would have used about myself. But after I thought about it, these are things I learned from being a guest. After I thought, it was like, well, those are true. You have those aha epiphany type moments when you do these conversations with hosts on shows. And of course, we also get the opportunity to share about our businesses as well. So I just want to make sure I don't forget to thank you for all the hard work you and your staff put into creating this show and giving people like me the opportunity to tell our stories.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. It's one of the highlights of my week is doing these interviews with people like you. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And look forward to having you back someday.
Well, I look forward to that too. And I don't know when it will be, but I'm always waiting to see what my next adventure or my next big challenge will be. And once I know what that is, I'll keep you informed. And when we get to an aha moment or a champagne moment, I'll be sure to get back to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Max.
Oh, thank you too. I really appreciate it.